What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, February 25th, 2019, start of a brand new week. There's a lot of stuff going on here. And, well, let's just get right into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. And obviously, we're going to start with Venezuela. I mean, right now, that is clearly, at least in my opinion, the top news story. You wouldn't know it looking at corporate media, which is still obsessing about the Oscars and political infighting and mass shootings from 2 weeks ago and so forth and so on. So over this last weekend, there was an incident at the border between Colombia and Venezuela where some trucks supposedly bearing humanitarian aid tried to cross the border, and they didn't actually get to the border before they were set on fire. And immediately the corporate media was out there saying, oh, there's this evil tyrant Maduro refusing to allow humanitarian aid into his country. Well, Maduro has already said that he thinks that this is covert aid for paramilitary groups. It has come on out that it was the U.S.-backed opposition that set fire to the trucks. This was a staged event for the media. Oh, Maduro is blocking aid. Maduro is blocking aid. How could he do that? And that was further confirmed because the International Red Cross came on out and issued a statement denouncing this aid convoy for using the Red Cross symbols without permission. So this whole thing was a fake from beginning to end. It's another staged event to make Maduro look bad. It's sort of a milder version of Assad's sarin gas here. And the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Areza is saying, this is a CIA operation. It's a false flag attack to be blamed on the Venezuelan government. And behind all of this wailing and gnashing of teeth about how Maduro will not allow humanitarian aid into the country, it is his country, okay? And there is a little aspect about international law that one needs to keep in mind, and that is that just because you're driving a truck full of food and medicine does not give you authority to cross into another country without that country's permission, period, end of story. Now, aid is getting into Venezuela. It's coming in from Russia and China, other places that are friendly to Venezuela, but the U.S. has not been friendly to Venezuela, and so why would Venezuela want to let those trucks in? But that's something that the corporate media is completely ignoring or refusing to tell you. It's illegal for the United States to simply drive trucks into Venezuela just because it's supposedly humanitarian aid. Now, meanwhile, over the weekend, there were hands-off Venezuela rallies held in cities all around the world. Banners out there. People are getting sick and tired of all this interventionism. And it's almost like we've gone back to the 60s and 70s when the United States felt like it was just open season and playing around. They considered South America, our backyard. We can just go mess around there. This, however, looks like it may escalate because you've already got Russia is in there. There are Russian supersonic bombers stationed in Venezuela. Russia certainly has a vested economic interest in Venezuela. And so now we're talking great power politics. So now John Bolton is out there screaming, "Embrace democracy, Venezuela." Actually, they did that last year when they elected Maduro. Now, right now, Mike Pompeo is down in Bogota, Colombia with Guido, who apparently has decided that he's less likely to suffer harm if he stays in Colombia. But he's meeting with Mike Pompeo, and Vice President Mike Pence, who will announce concrete steps for the Venezuela crisis which the U.S. created. This is how this goes on. The U.S. creates a crisis that we will solve it, usually with bombs. And but yeah, they're starting to talk about some kind of military intervention. And Mike Pompeo is saying the U.S. intends action against anyone who opposes the peaceful restoration of democracy in Venezuela, by which, of course, he means the installation of U.S. puppet ruler Juan Guaido as the president. That's what's going on here. This is a revival of the old Monroe Doctrine, which, again, goes back to President Monroe, which said, the United States should control this hemisphere. And it's Trump's rush to support Guaido has a rationale that includes both the region's oil reserves and Washington's strategic considerations. But the Trump administration may have jumped the gun and focused on bluntly sponsoring a coup against Maduro. Now, one of the reasons for that may be to distract from the fact that we kind of lost in Syria. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now joining our network. And you remember last week, Donald Trump basically issued a statement to the military in Venezuela, desert Maduro or bad things will happen to you. And Venezuela's armed forces basically have rejected that. I saw a headline in one newspaper saying, over 120 of Venezuela's military have now defected. 120, I mean, talk about that. But apparently there was a press conference in Caracas. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez, and he was being flanked by all these commanders from all the branches of the military, said that Washington will not be able to install a puppet and anti-patriotic government. They'll have to step over our dead bodies first. So it's getting serious. All right, let's take a phone call. Don in the Philippines. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. I believe that Trump is he thinks he's Ronald Reagan. He's trying to channel Ronald Reagan. Remember, Reagan did not go invade in the Middle East, but he did have his little adventures in Grenada and in Nicaragua.
Yeah.
And this is an old tradition that goes back a long ways. Is it bad? Yes, it's bad. I don't think it's as bad for these to mess around with these South American countries, these Latin American countries. I don't think it's as bad as the whole Middle Eastern mess that we got into over there.
Well,
and,
I think it's just as much of a sin or a crime to invade somebody else's country to steal their resources, and maybe the scale of the situation in Venezuela has yet to equal the scale of what we saw in Iraq and Syria and Libya and so forth. But we've already got, I think it's Bolton is talking about going back into Nicaragua and trying to overthrow Cuba. I mean, they could ignite the entire Caribbean into a regional war, and that puts it right on the border with the United States. So again, they're going about all of this so recklessly. It could all spiral out of control. I think the Mideast is on the verge of turning into a regional war.
Yeah, Trump. He's shown signs that he's trying to get out of Syria. I mean, he said that over and over again. We're leaving Syria. He called in the generals and had a photo op with the generals telling them we're going to get out of Syria, but they just won't do it. That's what goes on with the military. You tell somebody something, they salute smartly and say, yes, we will follow your order, and then they just don't follow your order, and he's finding out that that's the only thing he can do is start firing a lot of generals. He doesn't have the will to start firing people. He showed that.
Well, he should. He's showing once again he's a week later. I mean, now we've got the Pentagon is out there saying, maybe we don't want to go along with building this whole wall thing. We'll be talking about that later in the show.
Right. The Pentagon is not doing what he wants. They're just not doing it. Okay, I'll let you go, Mike. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Wait a minute. Trump's the commander-in-chief. He put people in that he knows won't listen to him, so he's responsible. If you put Bolton and Pompeo and Elliott Abrams in, they're going to do their own thing, then they're not going to follow what he says. So why would he put him in the first place? Trump's a lost cause. There was plenty of people Trump could have put in. Ray McGovern, William Binney for the NSA, Ray McGovern for the CIA, and other people from the Pentagon that could have got things done. He didn't do that. That makes Trump responsible for doing that, okay?
Yes.
Everybody, And Mike, with Venezuela, did you see Max Blumenthal? He went into like a food store in Venezuela. It was stocked full of stuff.
I was about to come to that because, we're being fed all this propaganda about, those poor, we must go save those poor, suffering Venezuelan people. Well, how about we go save those poor, suffering Palestinian people? Why are they kind of off the list of people we've got to take care of?
What about the Syrian people? When's the last time we brought them aid, Mike?
We haven't. Everybody else has. The United States has not.
And the British hasn't. I think France and Russia brought Syria aid. More Russia did, and China. But Britain didn't bring squat, and neither did the U.S. because they're on the same page. But, Mike, I looked at the video. They got stock full of wine. They got meat on the shelves, bananas, yogurt. You name it, they got it.
Yeah.
So CNN says, they need the basic, they got toilet paper. They need what? Toothbrushes? They got them. They got everything.
Yes.
Sure, there's hyperinflation, but that's from the economic sanctions.
Yes. That
devalued their, was it the Bolivar, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what a joke, Mike. Like, everybody needs to go look at the Gray Zone on YouTube, look up Max Blumenthal.
Yes.
And watch the video because it's very basic to figure out what's going on. It's just like with Iraq, Mike. It's like economic warfare, starving the people, but maybe they're not starving like in Venezuela. I mean, like I said, the shelves are stocked. But, Mike, have a good show. Everybody needs to watch that Max move because it's very important people watch that video, Mike. That tells you everything besides what the media is telling you. All right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open now. Actually, there are a lot of reporters who are in Venezuela who are starting to come on out and say, look, the conditions here are not what you're being told they are. They are much, much better. It's not great, obviously, with the hyperinflation. Article coming on out of Global Research, the war on Venezuela is built on lies, but then aren't they all? I mean, just stop and think about it for a moment. If Donald Trump got up at the Oval Office and said to the American people, we're going to invade Venezuela because we want their oil, would you go along with that? Of course not. Every ruler in history who initiates a war has to lie and trick his people into it. That's why we have USS Maine and Spanish mine that didn't exist. The Lusitania smuggling weapons to Britain and deliberately sent to where the U-boats were known to be hunting. Saddam's nuclear weapons. Assad's sarin gas. Pearl Harbor not really being a surprise after all. And on and on. All wars are started with lies, and this is just another one. Now, if Guido and his CIA people grab power, it will be the 68th overthrow of a sovereign government by the United States, most of them democracies. See, that's the thing. You're being told, we're bringing democracy to these people. They had democracy. What they wind up with after the U.S. intervention is a dictatorship. Iran is a classic example. Prior to 1953, Iran was a democracy. Mohammad Mossadegh was elected to his office. Then he refused to give discounted pricing on the oil to American and British oil companies. He was overthrown in the coup, and they installed the Shah of Iran, who ruled with an iron fist and the Savak secret police until the Iranian Revolution of 1979. So here's another story about the propaganda. Again, Global Research. And it's a guy who's in Caracas, and he's reading the online edition of Time magazine, which was claiming that you couldn't even find things like aspirin anywhere in Venezuela. So this reporter walks out of the apartment 4 blocks away to the nearest pharmacy, shelves stocked full of aspirin. Then a couple of days later, CNBC carried a claim there was no acetaminophen to be found anywhere. Basic things like Tylenol aren't even available. That must have taken Pfizer by surprise since they have a Venezuelan subsidiary. So this guy walks back to the pharmacy. Sure enough, the shelves are stocked with acetaminophen. It's just more lies. And this guy said that he actually bought all these products in their Venezuelan packaging to take home with him to show people that it was all just lies here. Over in Bolivia, their president is saying that this claim the U.S. is sending humanitarian aid really doesn't make sense. It seems to be a double standard. He's saying it's because the United States first strangled the country's economy with sanctions, and then they're sending in humanitarian aid. It seems to be a display of double moral standards. Well, yes, and that's one of the reasons why we kind of knew there was something iffy about this whole humanitarian aid thing to begin with. They're trying to make it the issue that will motivate Americans to support a military intervention. He won't let in the Band-Aids. He doesn't have to. It's his country. And according to these reports we're getting from Global Research, there are plenty of Band-Aids in those pharmacies as well here. Now, it looks like, especially since that video came out showing that it was the U.S.-backed opposition that actually set fire to those trucks. And by the way, a reminder, that bridge has always been closed. It's never been open to traffic. Why they chose that one is a mystery, but because of disputes between Venezuela and Colombia, even though they built that bridge, it's never been open to traffic. So all those barricades and everything that you saw there, they weren't put up recently. They've been there for a very, very long time. And now the Trump administration, apparently throwing a tantrum, is threatening to deport the family members of Venezuelan military officials, including some who live in the Miami area, who don't disobey the Maduro government and allow aid from the United States to enter Venezuela. We're talking about relations of these Venezuelan officials who live here in the United States. And the Trump administration is saying, turn on your leader, commit treason, or we're going to kick your families out of this country and back to Venezuela. Nasty stuff here. Mike Pompeo is out there bloviating. Maduro's days are numbered, and apparently Guaido is now formally requesting U.S. liberation of Venezuela. See, we're coming to liberate you. We're going to, first of all, liberate you from all that oil, and then we're going to liberate you from what's left of your freedoms and whatever's left of your money. And you're going to have a nice, pleasant, calm life, just like Chile had under Pinochet. So there is a new hashtag, of course, going viral out there in social media, hashtag no blood for oil. And people understand what this is about. This is all about oil and money. It's not about democracy. It's not about Maduro being an evil tyrant. It's not about people starving, because if the U.S. government were really concerned about people starving, they would do something about Palestine. So the U.S. is trying to pull together what they laughingly call the international community to join in the liberation effort of Venezuela. This is a diplomatic siege with the aim of regime change, with the possibility it could escalate into the use of military force. Now, Russian media is claiming, based on a leak, that the United States plans to depose Maduro next month. Whether it'll be a decapitation strike into Caracas or an assassination attempt, but that apparently is the timetable. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently Maria Zakharova, who's the spokeswoman for the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is out there tweeting that Russian intelligence says the U.S. government is in fact moving special forces to the borders of Venezuela along with military equipment. So it looks like full-on invasion, and it could turn into another Vietnam. Because what I expect Putin will do is exactly what he did in Syria. Supply the other side. And just wear the United States down in a war of attrition. And Putin also understands that the United States traditionally does not do very well in jungle warfare. Now, the sure sign that there's going to be an actual invasion will be if U.S. warships start streaming into the Caribbean. Because if you look at the map of Venezuela and how close Caracas is to the Caribbean, you know, coming in from the ocean side, makes a lot more sense than coming in from the Colombian border. But that's just my opinion. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Terry in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, there might be a lot of food on the shelves, but how many people are in the checkout line with the 80,000% hyperinflation going on? Nobody can afford to buy it.
Well, that's not what the media was claiming. The media was claiming that you couldn't find food and aspirin and acetaminophen, and it was clearly not true. And I haven't watched the Max Blumenthal video all the way through, but at some point I imagine he does show the checkout lines. Again, we cannot take anything that we're being told about Venezuela by the corporate media or the government at face value. We know they lie to start these wars. And we have to be very, very careful that we don't just say, oh, 80,000% inflation rate. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know for a fact until we hear it from Venezuela itself.
Well, I don't doubt it. With the sanctions that the U.S. put on, they had, and the oil prices low, they had to print money to make up the shortfall, and that's what happened.
Well, I know that's what's had to happen. How much of it they had to do, again, we don't really know. But, you know, 80,000% sounds more like propaganda than a hard economic number. Again, we have to be careful. When we hear it from Venezuela itself, you know, then we've got a solid source. Right now, you absolutely cannot believe anything that's coming in over corporate media or from the government. The only thing corporate media gets right are the sports scores and the weather, and frankly, they're not all that good on the weather.
Absolutely. It's almost like, you know, hey, this Syria thing's getting too tough. We're having a tough time. We didn't think we would. We need a victory. So let Venezuela's on the list down the line somewhere. Let's go down there and get a quick victory because we really need it bad. We've had all these failures before. It's almost like they're doing that.
Yeah,
And,
it almost felt like it was a rush job that, you know, Syria is now off the corporate media radar, and the fact that we didn't win there, the last a pocket of ISIS is about to be cleaned out. They're hanging on to the civilians as human shields. But it's only a matter of time. This thing is over. Assad won, the United States lost. And the United States is losing in Afghanistan as well. So, yeah, let's start another war in Venezuela as a distraction. It's like after the bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon, which was a huge embarrassment to the United States. 24 hours later, we invade Grenada.
Right. And just the last comment I got is that oath that Pompeo took at the U.S. Military Academy, I will not lie, cheat, or steal. It sounds like he's forgotten that, or he assumed that after he graduated it didn't apply anymore because he's done all three.
Oh, yeah. You know, once you cross into Washington, D.C., you know, lying and cheating, that's part of the job description.
Okay, Mike, I'm going to let you go. Have a good time, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And again, we all know the extent to which we have been lied to through the years by this government and by the corporate media. Crazed loan assassins, Spanish mines, poison gas. That's how they start these wars. And the government and the corporate media are going to say and create anything they think it's going to take to get you to say, well, we have no choice but to go into Venezuela. Because that's it. Because if you had a choice, you're going to say, stay home, keep our kids home, keep our money inside our country. Enough of this already. I'm expecting there to be a false flag in the United States blamed on Venezuela. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? Listen, I've been following this on the internet, and then I was listening earlier today to Alex Jones. And
okay,
to,
Mark, I got to
David
put you
Knight.
on hold. I got to put you on hold. Just stay on the line. We'll come right back to you after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Mark in North Carolina about Venezuela and lies. And Mark, just sort of pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I was going to mention on InfoWars, first of all, David Knight was good. I mean, he said this was, this concert was fake. It was not 250,000 people. At the most, they had, about 15,000. What do you call it again? The incident with the so-called supplies was basically a false flag.
Yes.
And he's good, and that we need to stay out of it. Okay. He didn't exactly praise Maduro, but that's not what. I don't care whether you like Maduro or not. The idea is it's none of our business. Now, Alex Jones, at the same time, basically said he believes we need regime change. He actually backed it up and said probably in about a week the AC-130s are going to start cutting down the. I didn't post it on my Facebook that I'm, as far as Alex Jones, I'm done with him. That he's sold out. Not the guy he used to be. I don't know what's happening, whether he's been bought off or what. But I'm finished with him. And I tried to call him, but I couldn't get through. I couldn't, he wouldn't take the call. Let's put it like this. I went to the gym, worked out. I don't take my phone in there with me when I do that. So I wasn't going to wait. But the thing is, the man's going to be. I don't think he was a fake all along. I think the man meant well through the years. He's the one who warned about Iran-Contra and the drug smuggling.
Yeah.
Had to do with Gary Webb, which was the first, about Nicaragua, about trying to overthrow the Nicaraguan government and all that. How coke was brought back in the United States and actually started the the crack epidemic.
Yes.
And he had Gary Webb through the years before he was murdered, and I don't think he committed suicide. You don't commit suicide with 2 shots to the back of the head.
No, you don't.
And on top of that, he had Freeway Ricky Ross, the real Freeway Ricky Ross, not the fat ex-cop there that's a rapper,
Yeah.
The real guy on. He'd have guests like this on all the time. But lately, that's not the case anymore. He's not, and like you said, I never thought he was a real, a Zionist, but I'm beginning to believe he really is that too, because he actually praised somebody like a thug, like a billionaire thug like Sheldon Adelson.
Well, Alex Jones has been a Zionist all along. In fact, if you go on out to YouTube and you search for Alex Jones Israel, you'll find this video from very, very early in his career where he's just declaring that, he supports Israel, he's a friend of Israel, he'll always support Israel. And I think that's, he was sending out a message, I'm willing to play ball, to get along with my career. And that was the issue which ultimately led to Alex Jones and I kind of splitting up because, Alex is the one who got me started in talk radio more than 10 years ago over at Genesis, for which I'll always be grateful. And I'd been on his show previously several times, but we sort of clashed swords over what was going on in Israel, and ultimately that's why he stopped talking to me.
But he's also the one that, as a matter of fact, I only learned about the dancing Israelis from him. From why, from him. I didn't know about that before that. Now I know plenty about it. I mean, it's all you can still find it on YouTube because no matter how they try to suppress it, somebody keeps on posting it back up there. And I'm passing around to friends of mine, sharing it with friends, and letting them know what's really going on. But the fact of the matter is that so he did stuff like that also. But I don't know. He seems to be working from both sides at times. But the thing with Trump now, he's become such a sycophant of Trump.
Yes.
I think that's one of his. And I think he's power hungry too. He wants to expand his empire more and more, and he wants to get in there with the mainstream talk radio too. He wants to get in good with the Rushes, the phonies like that, and Sean Hannity's and Glenn Beck, a psychopath like Glenn Beck, Levin, and all the rest of them. Savage is a little better than the others, okay? But these guys, this is who he seems to want to fit in with these days. And it's a shame, because I'm telling you this, Trump launches an attack on Venezuela, he can kiss any chance of having a second term goodbye. All right? He's done. He might as well might as well wrap himself up and get. And also, by the way, I think it would make Tulsi Gabbard the next president of the United States, because it's not going to be that easy. They may be able to roll in, of course, because Venezuela, the military doesn't have the power to stand up to the United States for any length of time. But once you're in there,
that's what they said about North Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly. Once you start, once you get in there, that's when the guerrilla war starts. Even with Iraq, that's when the guerrilla war starts. That's when troops start getting killed, maimed, and other things. That's when the frustration starts. The American troops, when they start getting the PTSD, because they start having to shoot civilians and who knows what. That's when the people get fed up. And also, you got to look at the possibility of a draft. He still wants to go after. He's still got that crazy Bolton who wants to go after Iran on top of it. And of course, there's always the possibility that we could go into World War III with Russia, and Russia is very prepared if that happens. So I mean, the guy has got to, somebody's got to get to talk to get to Trump. Now I've tweeted him. Get out of Syria. Leave Venezuela alone. Leave Iran alone. And I'm hoping other people do it too. And I've tried to call the White House to tell them that also. But it's hard to get through the switchboard there. By the way, 1-202-456-1111. That's the White House switchboard, folks. You want to call? Okay? And that's the only thing maybe we can do. Maybe we can stop this nonsense, because this seems to be, this is on a train.
You're an optimist here, but at this point it should be obvious. I mean, the vast majority of the country have been screaming, stop all these wars, for years now, for a decade at least. And our government isn't listening. The government is listening to the military-industrial complex. They're listening to the bankers. They're basically, from their point of view, the nation hovers on the edge of bankruptcy. We don't have the manufacturing to pull out of the debt. Other countries are refusing our agricultural exports because of GMO, as well as the tariffs have also taken a toll on that. So the only thing left is to go on into other countries and basically grab their wealth to use to pay our bills.
But you see, that might work with some, let's say Nazi Germany was all for, that was okay with them as long as they were winning, until they started getting their butts kicked, and it was a different thing. But Americans are like that. We don't believe in that. We believe the average everyday person just wants to be left alone, doesn't want war, doesn't want to grab other people's stuff. They just want to be, we don't want this. We're not a militaristic, the people are not a militaristic in this country.
Well, and unfortunately, the tone and character of the country is set by the government, and that's true of all nations. And there are a lot of people in Israel, for example, who completely disagree with what Netanyahu and the Knesset are doing. But Netanyahu doesn't listen to them any more than, Trump is listening to us. They're all listening to their advisors and mostly to their financial supporters, their campaign donors, who basically bought them at the last election. And it just seems like we've got all these world leaders right now who are thinking, a good war is what I need right now. And that's why we have all these flashpoints getting ready to go. And as far as I can see, it's really only a matter of time before it truly is a world war. In which case, it is a world war already. It's just kind of low key and fragmented, and they're hoping to slip it by without you noticing it. But people are noticing it.
But see, Mike, once the war starts, dwelling on, and the body bags start coming back, the seriously wounded start coming back. And when the soldiers themselves start making noise that they're tired of this, that's when they'll start paying attention.
Yeah, but remember Iraq? They were bringing the body bags back in the dead of night, and the media wasn't covering it. This is all being hidden.
Yeah,
We still don't know how many Americans died in the Iraq War. We don't even know how many Iraqis died in the Iraq War. And we won't find out until history, looking back.
But it was the Iraq War and Iraq and Afghanistan, but mostly Iraq at the time, that actually cost the Republicans the Senate and the Congress and the House back in 2006, and it would have cost Bush the presidency if they didn't have an idiot like John Kerry, a fake, a phony like John Kerry running against him. I mean, it was Kerry who actually, who said, "Who wants to be the last one to die for a mistake during the Vietnam War?" When he was head of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and then he starts talking about all the stuff that we need to go after Assad and Syria and all that. The man's a phony, and people saw through him. And the only reason Bush was, and also a member of Skull and Bones like Bush, and people saw through him. It's the only reason Bush got a second term. Other than that, he'd have been history right there. And in 2006, the Congress went down into a fight. The Republican Congress went down in a flaming defeat. So people do wise up after a while.
Well, back in 2006, a lot of people were still laboring under the illusion that the Republicans were the war party. But as we have seen throughout the Obama administration, the Democrats have become just as much war hawks as anybody else. The neocons are just pretty much everywhere. From, at least in terms of the government up and corporations, we are a warrior society now. That's where all the money is being made. That's where all the money is being invested. What people really want is illustrated by what they spend their money on. And what is our government spending our money on? More wars, more military equipment.
But the Democrats were a little bit different then. Okay, as a matter of fact, I've seen a video of Joe Biden threatening Bush that if he starts a war with Iran, this was during that they were going to start impeachment proceedings. Now, of course, he's the biggest war hawk going by. So yeah. Like I said, we're all hypocrites, basically. Biggest hope, I think, is Tulsi Gabbard. I hope it doesn't take I pray that it doesn't take a war to get the country ready to vote for her for president. We really, other than that, I don't have much faith in Bernie Sanders, because he seems to be flip-flopping all over the place about these wars also. I just feel that we're going to, we're in bad trouble. I don't think it's going to get to a nuclear confrontation with Russia, but I couldn't guarantee that either.
Well, I sure hope you're right, because I got a first strike target right out that window there. Anyway, listen, Mark, I got to let you go. We got a lot of stuff to get through today, and I've got one more caller. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, good day. Yeah, your caller about the Venezuela situation. Yeah, I agree with you on this, Michael, that the Cubans, Maduro has 40,000 Cuban special security around him, and Maduro is using the Cubans to prop up his regime. But I will say this.
Well, wait a minute. Where did you get that?
That's been all over, Michael. So I guarantee it's over around 40,000.
No. That's not what I asked you. Where are you getting this information?
That was on Matt Drudge. That was on Breitbart. That was on all the news outlets. I've seen it on all of them.
Okay. The reason I'm being cautious here is because
Matt Drudge.
The reason I'm being cautious about it is because, Bolton has already indicated that Cuba is now in the United States crosshairs as well. So, I mean, they've been talking about Hezbollah is down in Venezuela. I mean, that one is pathetically transparent fiction.
Yes. Well, let's listen to this, Michael. We know who Fidel Castro Ruz and Raul Castro Ruz are. Okay, we know they didn't even go by the name Castro when they were young men. They went by the name Ruz. If you check that out, you understand where I'm coming from. Give me a minute. I live in South Florida. I know what's going on. I know this very well, what's happening, actually. As far as Venezuela is concerned, yeah, there's a food problem over there. The people, the regime they have in there are a bunch of imbeciles. But I will say this much. If there wasn't oil in Venezuela, I don't think the United States didn't do much to help Cuba out, did they? Over the last 60 years, there's been an embargo.
Yeah, it's the U.S. embargo. The reason Cuba has been kept poor is the U.S. embargo. And anyway,
we agree.
Tom, I'm going to let you
say one more thing, if we could.
Tom, I got to let you go. Tom, I got to let you go. I want to get back to the news here because I've got an illustration coming up exactly of what we're talking about. So thanks an awful lot for the phone call. If we want to find out what U.S. interventions are like and what is going to be the future of the Venezuelan people, we need to turn to the history books. And this also applies to every other South America, well, any country in the world the United States has gone into. It has not made life better for the people. So back in 1973, the U.S. supported a coup d'etat in Chile, and they deposed the democratically elected Allende and put in a military junta headed by General Augusto Pinochet. Just a couple of weeks after that, Pinochet ordered a hike in the price of bread of 264% while freezing wages, and basically drove the entire country into abysmal poverty, along with other reforms like privatization, price liberalization, basically allowing private corporations to come on in and turn Chile into just another feeding ground here. That's what happens when the U.S. goes into a country. That's what the U.S. wanted to do in Cuba. That's what they had in Cuba under Batiste. Organized crime was down there with their hotels in Havana, Harbor, or Havana, the casinos, all kinds of stuff going on down there. More wide open than Las Vegas was. And Batiste was, selling Cuba's agricultural produce to American companies like United Fruit and PepsiCo at way below market rates, allowing these corporations to become highly profitable while impoverishing the people of Cuba. That's the U.S. model. That's what led to the Cuban Revolution. And after Fidel Castro took over, he wanted to normalize relations with the United States, would be the smart thing to do. And the United States said, well, you're going to have to continue allowing the mafia to run their casinos, and you're going to have to continue selling the agricultural produce, mostly sugar, at below market rates. And Castro said, no, I've got to rebuild this nation. And that's when the embargo went on in, and that's what drove Cuba into the Soviet sphere of influence, a mistake we seem about ready to repeat. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Actually, we're going to go ahead and close the lines for a bit because I've got a lot of news to get through today, and I don't want to be taken off topic. So getting on back to Venezuela, kind of wrapping up on that here. Over in Ukraine, their foreign minister, Pavel Klimkin, was making a speech about Venezuela in which he called Maduro a usurper. See, that's the big lie. He's a tyrant. He's a dictator. He's a usurper. No, he won his election last year in what international observers said was one of the fairest, most verifiable, transparent election systems on earth. Jimmy Carter has said Venezuela's election system is great. Carter's also said the U.S. election system is the worst. So, anyway. Saddam Hussein's granddaughter is also out there saying the whole world has seen the outcome of U.S. occupation, talking about what Iraq was like before the U.S. came there and what it's been like ever since. You have to disabuse yourself of the notion that the U.S. invading another country is a favor to that country's people. It is not. It brings poverty, it brings destruction, infrastructure's destroyed, historical buildings destroyed. It demoralizes the people. No, war is not a blessing. There's no way to wrap it up in any kind of ribbons or glitter that says, hey, this is new improved war. This is good war. No. Not when you're invading another country to steal its resources. One of our callers before was talking about this Richard Branson Venezuela aid concert, and they had a claim that there were 200,000 people showed up. Well, it wasn't anywhere near that much, and the Washington Post had to quietly delete that article from their website after making that claim. Again, it's all lies. Remember The Matrix, the movie The Matrix? You're living in one right now. Because you look at these flat screens in front of you and you think that's the real world. And no, it isn't. It's the world that the government and the corporate media choose to show you to get you to do what they want you to do. Got to hone those critical thinking skills here. Anyway, the Russian military has confirmed that Syria successfully repelled an Israeli missile attack, and apparently none of Israel's attackers achieved their objectives. This was in a southern region. All the missiles were intercepted. None hit their targets. Apparently the missiles were launched from the Mediterranean by 4 Israeli Air Force F-16 fighters. So Israel just keeps on poking. Over in Lebanon, a high-ranking member of the Lebanese Hezbollah resistance movement says that it is the United States that is the main cause that the crisis persists in Syria, that the U.S. is hindering the settlement. We'll be right back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are closed. I've got a lot of news to get through here, and I don't want to be taken off topic. So anyway, going on over to Syria, the reality is for anybody who's objective, the U.S. lost that one. Assad is still in power. That was the original. We have to save the people of Syria from the evil tyrant Assad. I mean, they keep using the same lines all over again. We have to save the people of Venezuela from the evil Maduro. And then when that one really didn't work on out, they had the false flag chemical weapon attacks, the weapons of mass destruction, which Russia brokered a deal on. But with Damascus firmly in control of Syria and its future, the proxy war against Syria is pretty much over. And the U.S. is trying to keep about 400 troops on the ground in there just to make it look like, they didn't fly out dangling underneath a Huey helicopter like happened in Saigon. But this war was decided on the ground. It was not decided politically. In other words, they weren't able to get all this coalition government to come around and basically persuade Assad to step down. And they won't be able to do it with Maduro. And again, the U.S. shows it can be very petty and vindictive. There is this lady, Hoda Muthana, and she's a U.S. citizen. She's known as an ISIS bride because she left the U.S. to marry one of the fighters in Syria. Now, she herself, that anybody knows, did not take part in any fighting. So she cannot be deprived of her citizenship for serving in a foreign country under a foreign government. But she wants to come home now, and it's being blocked by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He's describing her as a non-citizen terrorist. She has no legal basis for her claim of U.S. citizenship. Actually, all Hoda has to do is learn Spanish, fly to Mexico, and walk into the United States. Problem solved. Erdogan is now out there demanding that the U.S.-planned Syria safe zone must be under Turkey's control. And his rationale actually makes sense. He's saying it's my border, and it should be under our control. On the other side, of course, the Syrian Kurds are vowing to fight to the death if the Turks come into the safe zone. So we've got another conflict there. And again, I don't know why the U.S. is setting up a safe zone. Shouldn't that be the job of Assad and the Syrian government? It's their country, after all, here. Meanwhile, new data has come on out regarding Afghanistan, and more civilians were killed last year than in any of the previous 9 years of the now 18-year U.S. war in Afghanistan. And we're not going to win that one either. Meanwhile, the United States is still banging the war drums on China in the South China Sea. And the implications of this could be catastrophic. China's a nuclear power. And right now, I just get a sense around the world that governments are just starting to chafe at all this United States adventurism. And at some point, somebody's not going to back down. And it's going to be on for real. We could even see a spark come out from India and Pakistan. They're rattling their nuclear sabers. And, you know, while American media were talking all about Jussie's, you know, fake race attack, India and Pakistan are out there talking some very serious war talk. Nuclear war could break out in South Asia. Now, India and Pakistan have fought 4 wars over Kashmir since 1947. And India controls 2/3 of Kashmir, Pakistan and China the rest. This is one of the world's oldest confrontations. It's defied all attempts to resolve it. The United Nations called on India to hold a plebiscite to determine Kashmir's future, but Delhi ignored the demand, knowing it would probably lose the vote. So the Pakistan army is preparing for conflict. They're telling all of the hospitals in the area to be ready. Anyway. Alrighty. As you know, Donald Trump is in the air right now, Air Force One, on his way to Vietnam to meet with North Korea's President Kim Jong-un, who is on his way to Vietnam by armored train. And ahead of the summit, North Korean media is criticizing U.S. Democrats and other skeptics of the peace process, saying they're missing an historic opportunity and urging President Trump to ignore them. And the report warned that opponents are chilling the atmosphere ahead of the summit, would ultimately bear responsibility if the summit fails in any way. Now, analysts are trying to say that this is an attempt to sell Trump on Kim Jong-un's process by making it look like a failure of the summit would be a vindication of the Democrats. So there's some very clever politicking going on here. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Last week we were talking about this very strange incident in Haiti. Now, Haiti's got a genuine grassroots, you know, flaming torches and pitchforks rebellion in progress against its very, very corrupt government. And oddly enough, this group of people, including some Americans, was intercepted and arrested. And they had all kinds of weapons, satellite phones, paramilitary type stuff. And they were, the Americans at least, were very quietly returned to the United States in cooperation with the Haitian government, making it sound like these guys may have been sent on in to possibly assassinate the leaders of the Haitian protests to shut it all down here. Now we're getting a report that there are Canadian troops patrolling the Port-au-Prince airport. And apparently the Haiti Information Project got photographs. And the big stink is that the Canadian government has not asked Parliament or consulted the public for approval to send soldiers into Haiti. They just went ahead and did it. Over in France, the Elvest protesters took to the street for a 15th weekend running. In fact, the crowds were larger this weekend than last weekend. They're trying to reinvigorate their supporters. They're trying to stamp out the violence and the anti-Semitism in the movement's ranks. Well, the anti-Semitic acts are being carried out by the infiltrators, trying to create an image that all yellow vests are anti-Semites, to demonize them and allow for further persecution. And right now we're seeing a flood of anti-Semitic hate crime hoaxes all over France, while Israel supporters push on the French government for even more draconian laws, including laws that will criminalize criticism of the government of Israel. This is how Israel operates. Oh, there'll be a whole bunch of anti-Semitic acts. Protect us, help us persecute our enemies. Paul Craig Roberts came on out very, very bluntly, saying, who rules France? Not the French. And he's out there talking about the Representative Council of Jewish Organizations in France has instructed their puppet, President Macron, to criminalize opposition to Israel's racist state ideology of Zionism. And the puppet complied. Macron complied. The anti-Zionism is now equated with anti-Semitism. That's nonsense. That's like saying that the only reason people complain about the Nazis is they hate German people. It's ridiculous. It is completely, utterly ridiculous. Macron should be ashamed of himself, but being a politician, he had his shame surgically removed long, long ago. Okay. Now, as you know, Representative Ilhan Oman came under serious criticism for talking about AIPAC and its ability to influence politicians through money and other means. And anytime anybody says anything like that, they're denounced as an anti-Semite, unless they themselves, of course, are Jewish. And as you know, Al Jazeera did this documentary on the Israel lobby here in the United States. It was suppressed from broadcast because of the Israel lobby. And in it, they got pro-Israel lobbies talking, boasting that its money influences Washington, D.C. So it's okay if the Israelis say, we're buying your politicians, but don't you dare say it. You're an anti-Semite if you say it. Meanwhile, with the IDF engaged in strikes apparently aimed at preventing Hezbollah from acquiring advanced weaponry, the Israeli Navy is drilling for war up in the north, off the Israeli coast. So one wonders what they're getting ready to do here. Meanwhile, the Israeli government has approved thousands more units of settler construction in the heart of Palestinian communities. Israel is pledging to settle, 2 million Jews in the West Bank. All of this illegal under international law. Now, as Israel's coming up on their national elections, Netanyahu is trailing in the polls. Benny Gantz merged with another party to form the Blue and White Party, which is now leading in the polls, which means he's probably going to be the next prime minister, which won't change Israel's policies toward Palestine. But I think a lot of people would be very happy to see Netanyahu faces corruption charges. And Netanyahu tried to build his own joint party by inviting the extremist Otzma Yehudit party. Now, these are Kahanists. They are so racist, even AIPAC doesn't like them. And Netanyahu may have overplayed his hand because a lot of people are recognizing it as an act of desperation. And they're saying it's a bad move because they don't want lawmakers from the party of Mir Kahane into the Knesset. Anyway. The United Nations has charged Israel with unauthorized burying of radioactive nuclear waste in the Golan. And this is coming right from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He included that allegation in a report his office prepared for the UN Human Rights Council's 40th session. And Israel's Foreign Ministry spokesman Emmanuel Nashon it's utter nonsense. It's it's laughable. It's silly, really. How ridiculous. Anyway. Now, Iran apparently has been working in the background to figure out a new way to interact with the global economy. And a senior Iranian official, Shamkhani, is saying the Islamic Republic has devised new plans to counter the U.S. sanctions, which eliminate the need for a deal with Washington. And he said, basically, negotiating a deal with the administration of Trump is wrong because it would indicate our acceptance of U.S. violations of its commitments under a 2015 nuclear deal. Another story, this one coming on out from the Times of Israel. MI6 spy chief makes secret Israel trip amid new Iran nuclear activity. Well, it's not very secret if it's in the headline. And the headline itself is a little misleading because you read it and you think Iran is starting to do something. But they aren't. If you read the body of the article, they're basically talking about that Iran may be considering renewal of nuclear activity. And the way the article is written, they say that concerns that Iran may be considering breaching the 2015 nuclear deal. It's the United States that breached the 2015 nuclear deal. Remember what I said earlier in the show. You've got to be very careful. Everything you're getting from government and the corporate media, it is lie, it is propaganda, it is spin, it's perception management, it's consent manufacturing, or it's distraction, condotizing. Iran has carried out its first submarine-launched cruise missile test. Now, nobody has any illusion that Iran's Navy could stand up to the U.S. Navy in that Gulf. But it's becoming very obvious that the U.S. Navy will suffer some hurt. Okay. But tensions between the U.S. and Iran are quietly escalating in the background. Over in Yemen, dozens of mercenaries who were fighting for Saudi Arabia have been killed in a strike by a domestically manufactured ballistic missile fired by Yemeni army forces on their base in northwestern Yemen province of Sa'ada near the border with the southern Saudi region of Najran. Now, the missile used is called the Badr P-1 missile. It was unveiled during a ceremony in the Yemeni capital city in October 27th of last year. It is said to have a pinpoint accuracy of 3 meters. And I'm glad that this article, which came out in Press TV, hammered home the point that this is domestically produced inside Yemen. Because otherwise the corporate media would be screaming, Iran is sending them missiles. Iran is sending them missiles. There are signs that things may be slowing down in Yemen. I think everybody's getting tired of this. Apparently there's going to be a joint withdrawal from 2 ports in Hodeidah. And actually it's happening today. This is called the first phase of the joint withdrawal of combat forces from Yemen's Hodeidah is underway today. The Houthis are expected to withdraw from the grain port of Salif and the oil terminal at Ras Isa and withdraw at least 5 kilometers away. And that at the same time, the Saudi-backed forces are going to be backing off from the Kilo 7 road, a vital aid route that they've cut off. So at least aid will start getting on back in there. Now, last week there was a story about how the United States is getting ready to start selling nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia. And everybody starts saying, oh, weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction. Actually, they're talking nuclear reactors. There was another story from 2 weeks ago that apparently Saudi Arabia and Israel have actually secretly been buddy-buddy, going back decades, and that Saudi Arabia has already acquired nuclear weapons technology from Israel. But this technology is about nuclear power plants, and critics are saying this could increase the risk of spreading nuclear weapons technology Well, it depends. If it's a classic uranium fission reactor, then yes, what comes out the back end is plutonium, bomb stuff. And apparently Trump is going along with this because Saudi Arabian interests have been very generous campaign donors. Remember Kosovo? Kind of messed that place up a while ago. And apparently NATO is getting ready to go back on in. German politician Willy Wimmer is saying that Kosovo as a state has been planned since the 1980s. Its only purpose is to be an American aircraft carrier on the ground. And that does drive a lot of the agenda. The reason the United States grabbed Hawaii, we were the unsinkable battleship Hawaii. So here a war, there a war, everywhere a war. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the wars all around the world. It's starting to get hard to find some place that's actually at peace right now. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif says the West has turned the Middle East into a powder keg with its arms sales to the Arab countries of the region, stressing that the weapons supplies have not contributed to regional security. Quite the contrary. It seems like everybody, gets a bomb and they think, ooh, let's test this puppy out here. And over the past year alone, Western countries have sold $100 billion worth of weapons to the countries of the Persian Gulf Cooperation Council. Did the weapons bring anyone security? No, they ratcheted up the tensions, but they make money. Eisenhower did try and warn us. Now, this next story you need to pay attention to. Okay. A federal judge last Friday, District Judge Gray Miller, has ruled that a male-only draft is unconstitutional. We told you this was going to be coming over the years. So basically, they're now going to have young girls register for the draft, and they'll be eligible for the draft when the draft is brought back. And they can be put into combat roles. So, saw it coming anyway. Article coming on out of Time. Americans want a less aggressive foreign policy. It's time lawmakers listen to them. I'm glad that Time actually took this editorial stance. Because the American people, we are sick and tired of war. We're a war-weary people. We've had enough. We're seeing all this money flow out of our pockets, out of our country, and be basically burned up, destroying all these other countries. We didn't win in Syria. We're not going to win in Afghanistan. We're mired in Libya and Yemen. We're still stuck in Iraq. The Iraqis want us to leave. The U.S. won't. And now we're talking about going into Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. Maybe that's why the rush is on. Maybe the warhawks have realized that the American people are fed up. There are anti-war protests out there in the streets. Corporate media will not cover them. I learned that one the hard way back during the startup to the Iraq War, when there were two demonstrations side by side. One was put on by Clear Channel. It had free hot dogs and soft drinks, and that was, support our troops. We're going to go into Iraq and we're going to give them what for. And the other one, of course, was, a peace demonstration, which didn't have hot dogs because we didn't have any sponsors. And a news crew from a local network affiliate parked by the peace demonstration, walked right through it without even slowing down, set up their cameras and got all the video they wanted of the pro-Iraq war demonstration, packed up, walked right back through the peace demonstration without slowing, got in their van and left. Interesting little article. This came out in Global Research. It said, America's enemies, who's on the list? And the instant I saw that headline, my first reaction is, who isn't on the list? But they basically did an analysis of the countries that America views as enemies, starting with the high priority enemies. Russia, because of its military power, it's a nuclear counterweight to U.S. global domination. China, because of its huge economic power and the growing scope of its trade, investment, and technology networks. We can't compete with them anymore, so let's just blow them up. North Korea, because of its fierce independent foreign policies and its strategic location. Venezuela, because of the oil resources and socio-political policies. It's a challenge to the U.S.-centered neoliberal model in Latin America. Iran, again, more about the oil. Syria, strategic position. Then you have the mid-level enemies, the not-so-bad enemies, starting with Cuba because of its independent foreign policies and its alternative socio-economic system, which stands in contrast to the U.S.-centered neoliberal regimes in the Caribbean, Central, and South America. Then comes Lebanon because of its strategic location on the Mediterranean and the coalition government's power-sharing arrangement with the political party Hezbollah, which is becoming increasingly influential in Lebanese civil society. Then you have Yemen because of its independent nationalist Houthi-led government. All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about the nations that are on America's enemies list. And down at the bottom, while still making the list, but the least important enemies, at least for the moment, are Bolivia because of its independent foreign policy and its defense of indigenous peoples' territorial claims, meaning don't come in here and cut down trees where the natives are living. They support the Chavista government in Venezuela. Then you have Nicaragua because of its independent foreign policy and criticisms of U.S. aggression toward Cuba and Venezuela. So now nations that criticize us are considered our enemies. Have you noticed that phrase, independent foreign policy, repeated over and over and over again in that list? And it tells us just how far along this global government, New World Order, neoliberal utopia is, where they're literally going after countries for having a different way of running their countries other than neoliberalism here. Over at the International Court of Justice, they have issued a ruling that Great Britain has an obligation to bring to an end its administration of the Chagos Archipelago as rapidly as possible, and all member states must cooperate with the United Nations to complete the decolonization of Mauritius. And, okay. I'm getting messages on my watch, messages on my talk screen. It's very, very busy in here. Anyway, why is this significant? Well, because the Chagos Islands are more popularly known as Diego Garcia. And the United States has a huge military base there. It's considered someplace you don't want to be assigned to, but it does project a lot of power over that part of the world's oceans here. All right, we're going to go ahead and take some phone calls now. I got past the important stuff. Patty in New York City, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Michael. I have one big question. For the life of me, I can't figure out why Russia and China isn't doing anything to stop the United States, because they must know that after the U.S. takes out Venezuela and maybe Nicaragua, Cuba, and finally the prize Iran, they're coming after China and Russia. So I don't understand, especially with both countries having investments in Venezuela, why they would allow the United States to do this.
Well, first of all, the reason that Russia and China do not directly confront the United States is because we would have mushroom clouds blossoming all over the planet and Israel off to one side laughing its head off that we were all so foolish. I don't think Russia has decided not to do anything about Venezuela. I think they're going to do in Venezuela what they did in Syria, which is to simply send in all kinds of supplies, military supplies for Maduro, drag the United States into a war of attrition, which the United States cannot sustain.
Right, right. Well, I do hope they do something because, you know, if the big fear is nuclear war, I really think that if Russia and China would exert their muscle in the world, it would avoid nuclear war. I think that if they were more, like, for instance, I never could understand why Russia, when there was the UN vote in the Security Council about closing the airspace of Libya, that Russia abstained from that vote rather than saying no, which is what they did in Syria, I think. But I know the Libya vote, they abstained. And if they had voted no, we might not have been able to do harm to Libya.
Well, I think a lot of the harm we did in Libya was done more on the ground than in the air. I don't know why Russia abstained on that particular vote. But the fact is that Russia and China are exerting their muscle. It's just economic muscle, not less than military muscle. And that's why the United States is in a panic. China is making all kinds of deals with other countries. They're a manufacturing powerhouse. Same with Russia and their agricultural exports. They're all GMO free. The United States is finding itself in a position of not being able to economically compete with Russia and China. And again, the same situation that led into both World War I and World War II. If we can't compete with this other country, let's come up with an excuse to bomb them out of existence.
Right. Well, I do hope Russia and China does something truly exciting.
Well, I've had enough excitement for this one life. I think Russia and China are on the right course. You know, peace through commerce, make deals. And unfortunately, they may also be just minding the clock, because I think a lot of people are looking at the United States as being very fragile. And despite its military might, we're seeing an economy that hovers at the edge of collapse. We're seeing political infighting that's just insane and public.
Right.
And people have lost all trust in the government. This is a nation that really can't function much anymore. And I'm sure the Russians are looking at the parallels and saying the U.S. is going to follow the Soviet Union into the dustbin of history.
Right. Well, it can't happen soon enough.
I unfortunately would agree with you. All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, Patty. We're going to let you go. And anyway, the Pentagon has been engaged in a project called the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, or JLTV, which was supposed to partially replace the aging Humvee. And after spending $50 billion on it, it's been declared not operationally suitable by the Operational Test and Evaluation Division of the Defense Department. And in their latest report, all variants of the JLTV had issues regarding reliability, maintenance, crew situational awareness, and safety. And the Pentagon's testers said the high number of deficiencies meant the vehicles were not operationally effective for use in combat and tactical missions. So what they've just created is a very expensive run into town, pick up some beer vehicle. The Army has signed a $174 million deal for Alliant Tech Systems operations to turn existing artillery shells into smart weapons. And apparently this will be completed in 2022. All right. Turning to the domestic politics here and getting on back to the factionalization we're seeing, Steve Bannon is predicting that 2019 will be the most vitriolic year in American politics since before the Civil War. Actually, I think 2020 will be. And during an interview on Face the Nation, he said Democrats could possibly weaponize the findings from special counsel Robert Mueller's probe and use the investigations into Trump taking place in New York Southern District against the president, heating up political tensions throughout the entire year. Now, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff is out there saying that if the Justice Department does not make public the full Mueller report, that Democrats will file a lawsuit to try and get it put into the public domain. And he may be hoisting on a petard right there. But, you know, Schiff was out there being interviewed by George Stephanopoulos, and he said, we will obviously subpoena the report. We'll bring Bob Mueller in to testify before Congress. We'll take it to court if necessary. And, you know, we are going to have to make this public. Well, we've already had leakers come on out and say that there really isn't anything in it, that it's a nothing burger, that Mueller found some procedural crimes. So this could turn into a huge backfire, huge embarrassment here. All righty. Jussie Smollett, as you know, has had his 15 minutes of fame. And a lot of people are still responding to it. Oh, how could he have done this? He's defamed the show. He's defamed whatever. And the fact that this case turned out to be a hoax shouldn't come as too big of a shock. And it turns out, and we've said this before, a great many hate crime stories turn out to be hoaxes. One of the most famous was Tawana Brawley. Lives were ruined. Careers were destroyed. Nothing happened to Tawana. You know, oh gee, yes, it was a lie. And you've got the Smollett case, you've got the Yasmin Saweed, Air Force Academy, Eastern Michigan, Wisconsin Parkside, Keene College, Covington Catholic, and Hopewell Baptist burning. Racial scandals all turned out to be fakes, and they're not isolated. Now, the author of this piece was writing a book, Hate Crime Hoax, identified a data set of 409 confirmed hate hoaxes. There's another list that has some overlap, but contains 348 hate hoaxes. That's over at fakehatecrimes.org, which is a website you should take a look at. Researcher Laird Wilcox put together yet another list of 300 hate crime hoaxes in his book, Crying Wolf. Now, to put these numbers in context, a little over 7,000 hate crimes were reported by the FBI in 2017. And perhaps 8 to 10% of these are widely reported enough to catch the eye of a national researcher. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Robert in London. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yes, good afternoon. I've been listening to all the war talk, etc. My comment is, to my personal knowledge, the question, what is wrong with America, is a 50-year-old question. And the question number two, which will bring down America? Is it the economic collapse that causes a military collapse, or is it a military collapse that causes an economic crash? Which goes, military defeat or economic crash? Which goes first? And it's such a balance as to which one causes which. And I think that we're so close to finding out very soon.
I think you're absolutely right. We know that all the economic indicators put out by the government are fiction. And certainly out here in Hawaii, we are already starting to see major inflation. The sticker shock at the local Safeway is just, it's insane. There are things we no longer buy simply because we cannot afford them anymore. And that's how tight it is.
Sure.
And, but when people start going hungry, that's when they're going to get angry. That's what happened over in France. We could see yellow vest protest. Well, there have already been yellow vest protests here in the United States, at least 20 of them. They don't get any coverage, though. As far as the future of the United States of America, in the future of the world, things look very dark. I wish I could be more optimistic. I would love to be more optimistic. I'd love to say things are going to be great. We're all going to be living in Tomorrowland. But the United States has become this rogue warrior nation that is bent on simply conquering the rest of the world and living off the plunder. And if you remember every empire throughout history, it's great for the emperors, and it's pretty bad for everybody living underneath them, whether that was Alexander's empire or the Roman Empire or the Byzantine Empire. Empires are only good for the emperors.
Yeah. Well, I am very concerned about the future, and I actually think it's really black. I don't want to explain why, but I could. But I don't think you want to hear stuff. I was once at a conference, an AI talk about the quality of the AI and computers writing poetry and stuff.
Yes.
And I was sitting down to somebody, and I said, AI is going to go a long way from here, and I can explain to you what I think is in the future for AI. And you are, in 3 minutes, you are going to get up from the table and walk away because it's too tough. And sure enough, 3 minutes later, he got up and walked away. But his girlfriend was still sitting there, so she got another few more minutes of tough talking. It's really dark, I can assure you. Really, really dark.
Well, any tool can be used. Any tool can be used for a good purpose or a bad purpose, and AI, I think, they're already talking about using it for military application, and that's a very, very dark purpose.
You bet. You bet. Absolutely. It is the death of man. I'll tell you, it is the death of man. Well, it's not really the death of man, but it really is a machine against mankind. It really is. And I could give you the Bible verse if you want, but that's, there we go. You've heard the Bible verses already, but it's there.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Okay. I think it's. I've got the wire on my phone. Yeah, like I say, I believe in Bible prophecy, and I believe that what it's saying is that the world is going to be so hugely different, and I really believe in the giving way of the Western world to the new empire of Russia. That's what I believe, and I believe in the retaking of what was the Iron Curtain.
Robert, I'm sorry to have to do this to you, but I've got to cut.
Yeah, that's okay. I understand you.
Yeah, we got to take another commercial break here.
Another day.
All right, have a good day. Thank you for the call. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and there's an interesting story coming out of Michigan. Apparently, police have arrested Nikki Jolie, who is a transgender activist, and they've accused Jolie of burning down her own home in a hate crime hoax. And this Nikki Jolie organized a series of pro-LGBTQ events and initiatives in the socially conservative town, and they say police are saying she intentionally set fire to their own residence in 2017. 5 pets died in the inferno, and the FBI investigated the incident as a hate crime, given that Jolie had allegedly received threats prior to the fire. But when police investigated, they discovered it was a hoax. And Jolie was just trying to get national attention to advance their career. Now, hate crime hoaxes occasionally get exposed, but many times they succeed. What if they're all hoaxes? Ever think about that? Over at the Covington Catholic High School, the attorney representing Nick Sandman is out for blood, and he's getting ready to start filing defamation lawsuits. And he's looking at HBO's Bill Maher for defamatory statements against Nick Sandman. And these comments came after Sandman filed a lawsuit against the Washington Post over its coverage of the students' encounter with the Native American elder at the Lincoln Memorial. And attorney Linwood told Fox News that in addition to the Post, his legal team is also looking at other outlets, including CNN. Now, in the case of the corporate media, you're going to have to overcome the absence of malice argument. Did they intend to defame and misinform? I don't think that applies in the case of Bill Maher. He may be in some real trouble there. Article coming on out of uns.com. The Atlantic Bridge, which is a German front organization set up by Washington to propagandize Germans to serve Washington, has failed in the job. The latest survey conducted by the front group shows that 85% of Germans are still alienated from the United States. The front group's chairman acknowledged the great loss of trust in the United States by a margin of 2-1. Germans see China as a more reliable partner for Germany than the United States. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Joe in California, aloha. What's on your mind?
Mike, in reference to this case in Michigan, I believe it was Michigan, with this transgender.
Yes.
You know, haven't they suffered enough? I mean, let's you know, I think the community and that socially conservative community should pitch in, buy him a new house and 5 new pets.
I'm sure that he probably had insurance on the property before he did it. And thank you for the call. We got to take a break for station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we do have a guest. It's not the lovely Lady Claire. But before we get to the guest, though, we got to take one more phone call, and that will be from Art off the grid. Art, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, want to talk about the women in the draft here. I'm going to kind of upset a few people. But before I get to that real quick, you know, this hate crime stuff going on with this, whoever this new one is burning down its house.
Yes.
Folks, you know, nobody's believing your crap anymore. That's why you're getting caught, okay? As Joan Bear, what's her name, Joy Bear on The View, replied to Whoopi Goldberg when she said, why do we keep doing this? Joy Bear said, because we so desperately want to believe it. Okay,
yes.
You know what, folks? Quit, okay? Now, with women in the draft, because I know you got your guests coming up, women in the draft, here's how I look at it. I'm kind of an old-fashioned guy living in a modern-day world, so I know I got to kind of have to deal with things as they are. However, ladies, for those of you and you fellas out there who seem to have a problem with women in the draft, you wanted equal rights.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, I think Art just hung up. Okay. All right, so sitting behind me is James from Arizona, otherwise known as Cactus Moon. He's one of the oldest members and supporters of WhatReallyHappened.com, and he and his wife are out here on vacation, and he decided he wanted to sit in on the third hour and just chit-chat about all kinds of stuff there. So I see you actually, before we get into your list, you had this story about writing your representative a letter about Israel and Palestine. Can you tell that story?
I called the her Washington office. It was her last name, Senator McSally, and I told her I was against the things that Israel was doing and the BDS, how the anti-BDS movement and all that sort of business. I got a letter back from her. She said and she thanked me for my support of Israel, that she felt the same way.
There you have it, folks. They're not even reading those letters. They just scan for words and send out a canned response. And apparently the idea that any American could be opposed to what Israel's doing in Palestine hasn't been programmed into that computer anywhere.
I'll tell you what I wanted to talk about today.
Okay.
I wanted to talk about the Holocaust. I have a brief history for you, a rather condensed history. And I have some credentials in this area. I've been personal friends with many of the people that have investigated it. But the condensed history goes something like this. I have here a page from the World Book Encyclopedia, and I looked up death camps. And under death camps, oh my, it doesn't have anything. So I looked up Holocaust. Oh my, nothing on the Holocaust. World Book Encyclopedia, 1958. In addition to that, if you looked at the Eisenhower's crusades in Europe,
yes,
that was 539 pages. De Gaulle wrote a memoir,
yes,
and I can't remember how many pages he had in there. And of course,
Churchill
wrote the
not a word,
right,
not a mention about.
Totally 7,000 pages.
Yes.
Not word about 6 million Jews dying, gas chambers, or Holocaust.
Nope, not a word.
So there's your condensed history. Well, why is it important? Why are we even talking about that today? Well, it's because the Holocaust is held up to the American public and the politicians as to why we owe Israel something. And of course, President Assad from Syria, I thought, had the best explanation. He says, well, assuming this is true, and all this is true, why are the Palestinians paying for it? And of course, there's no answer for it. And if you do investigate the Holocaust, you're punished severely with jail time.
Yes.
Let's see, I think it was Bishop William Richardson, as I recall. He came out and he says there's just no evidence for homicidal gas chambers, and he was in trouble.
Yep.
And of course, one of my friends, David Irving, he was incarcerated, put in jail for 13 months for something he wrote 17 years ago. They originally had him booked for 10 years in jail because of it. Ernst Zundel went to jail for 7 years. Germar Rudolph went to jail. In 16 countries, it's against the law to question the Holocaust. You're called the Holocaust denier, which is a meaningless term. I refer to it as Holocaust truthers. I went in 1994 and visited all those sites, and I had pretty much of an open mind. I really did. But when I started looking at those things that they called homicidal gas chambers, it was almost laughable. Now, you probably remember David Cole.
Yes, I remember David Cole. He did this amazing video about Auschwitz.
Well, I had met him in 94, and he asked me to do some follow-up for him over there. So when I was in Auschwitz, I did the work I had to do, and then I went and asked permission. Of course, I didn't get permission because they wanted to know my credentials and who I was and who I was supporting and whatnot. But I've known Ernst Zundel, Frederick Tobin, a whole bunch of people like that. And I didn't know any of them that didn't start out believing this. They all believed it. We all believed it until we saw the evidence.
Oh, I'm the same way. When I was raised in school, I mean, I was fed the story, and we have to feel sorry for the Jewish people, and never say bad things to them. And it wasn't until I saw how people who were questioning the accuracy of the Holocaust story were being treated that I started to get suspicious. Because if you claim that you saw the Bigfoot, you don't lose your job. If you claim you've been taken up into outer space in a flying saucer, you don't get thrown in jail. If you claim that you saw the Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster's love child, people will laugh at you, but that's the end of it. Only in this one area of inquiry is so much force of law being brought to bear to discourage people from that questioning. And that right there tells me there is some great lie being hidden.
Well, I want to lay a little more background before I get into the ramifications of it. And that is, I looked up and read on these things, and the established thing that they have now is it was in homicidal gas chambers with Cyclone B, which of course is impossible. By the way, while I'm on that, and before I forget, Fred Leuchter did a report, a forensic report on the homicidal gas chambers at both Auschwitz and Majdanek.
Yeah.
And he found, when they came back, they took their specimens, sent it to an independent laboratory, found no traces of Cyclone B, which is the common name for that is Prussian blue, and it leaves that stain there, and it leaves it for a long time. And the museum at Auschwitz repeated the experiment, and they found the same thing. They didn't find any evidence. So what did they do? They changed the story. They said, well, there wasn't enough of the Cyclone B in the gas chamber long enough to leave stains. Where do you go with that? But
let's be honest. Auschwitz did in fact change that plaque that was out front.
Oh, yes.
Where originally it had said 4 million died here, and then they went down to 1.5 million of all kinds, not just Jews, but Poles, Gypsies, everybody. And of course, most of those people actually died of the typhus epidemics that swept through Germany. That the retreating Germans brought back from Russia. And they didn't have the medicines to deal with it. And what the Zyklon B was actually for, it was a fumigant to kill the body lice that were carrying the typhus from person to person to person. But when you see those photos of those very emaciated people, anybody who's a doctor is going to look at that and say, yeah, that's what typhus does to you. It just dehydrates you and you waste away. So anyway, Auschwitz took out the plaques that said 4 million, put in new plaques that said 1.5 million, but still that magical 6 million number is still being wafted around.
Actually, they've come down below the 1 million mark now, but when I was there, they have the displays showing the shoes and the glasses and whatnot. They're not on a flat plane. They're on a tilted plane like that to make it look like there's more there. Well, the whole row was down there, and I went kind of along the side, and I opened up that back door, and that's what I found.
Yeah.
And the other thing I found there that was rather interesting is when you go, and this is an Auschwitz one, which is the main camp.
Yeah.
I looked at one, and all the window was blacked out, all black. So I went around behind to find out what it was blacked out for, and that's where the swimming pool was.
Yes.
And there's testimony from the inmates that they used the swimming pool.
Yeah.
So,
no, they had amenities there. This idea that Germany wanted to kill the Jewish prisoners in these camps is laughable. Germany needed them because they were slave labor. They were making material for the German military. And, why spend the money and the fuel to kill these people when, they're more useful being kept alive? Remember, the Red Cross had offices in all of these camps. They don't report gas chambers and gassings and deaths. And, the prisoners, they weren't death camps. They were slave labor camps, which doesn't make it okay because slave labor is still bad. But I visited, when I was working on a film project in Munich, I got to visit Dachau. And the tour guide there said, there was no death stuff. This was a factory. The prisoners here made things for the army.
What year was that? Do you remember?
It was the year that Challenger blew up. And I know it's an odd thing to link to, but that happened while I was over there.
Well, a lot of people don't know that as soon as you walk through the gate at Auschwitz, that first building there was a brothel for the inmates, and they had their own money.
Yeah, they had script money. They had a theater. They had an orchestra.
That's not an opinion. That's a fact. You can see pictures of the money.
Oh yeah,
that they could use.
Oh yeah,
and they had, I think, 7 orchestras.
Yes.
Now the Carmelite nuns. Are you familiar with them?
Yes.
Okay, so the Carmelite nuns took over one of the buildings there, which was the old theater.
Yeah.
And the Jewish fringe had a big riot type of thing. I don't know how big it was to kick them out because they wanted that exclusively to be the memorial for Jews.
Oh, okay.
And it was really interesting going through Auschwitz. When I did take the tour, again, I took the tour after I did all the work I had to do. And this guy is showing me this stuff, and I had to keep from laughing, but a couple of times I broke out laughing, because what he was telling me was so utterly impossible and utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
And he's looking at me now, and he knows that I know.
Yeah.
So he said if I'd have told him sooner, he could have showed me a lot more for a couple $100.
That would have been interesting indeed. I mean, the whole point of all these laws to prevent questioning the Holocaust is to keep people from sitting down with a pencil, paper, and a calculator and actually running the numbers on what it would have taken to get rid of that many people, dispose of their bodies, and Germany just didn't have that kind of resources, didn't have that much coal, and they needed the coal for steel making for the war. So it didn't make sense. But again, the reason I think that we're seeing all these laws come on out against questioning the Holocaust is because more and more people are questioning it. In our age, we have come to understand we are lied to on a massive, massive scale. Yeah. About Saddam's nuclear weapons, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Pearl Harbor surprise, and it just goes on and on. We're being lied to today. We're learning that these hate crimes that TV shows us are likely hoaxes. Probably most of the ones that are hitting France right now are hoaxes to support Israel's push for more stringent draconian laws.
Yeah.
They want laws to make it illegal to criticize the actions of the government of Israel. And that, to me, Israel wants that in this country. There are an alarming number of members of Congress who want to go along with it, even though it clearly is a violation of the First Amendment.
Well, you're aware that originally they claimed that there were homicidal death camps inside Germany.
Yes.
Okay. And that they later came out with that shortly. Well, I don't know how recent it's been, but it's out there that there were no homicidal gas chambers, death camps in Germany. What's interesting is they have eyewitnesses claiming that they saw the gas chambers, they saw their friends go in. Of course, they flew the smoke come up in the air. While I'm on the smoke thing, crematorias do not smoke.
If they're properly designed, they don't issue smoke.
But I think it was, who was the one that, help me out with it. He's the one that they've thrown the apple over the wall and everything, and he just recently came out, and when I'm saying recently, within the last 5 years, he said it was all a lie.
Yeah, they made it up.
And the interviewer is saying, well, why did you tell us a lie? He says, well, it wasn't a lie. And the interviewer was going like, he doesn't know what to say. And the guy says, it wasn't a lie because I really believed it. Where do you go with that?
Yeah, that's definitely. Well, I mean, there have been this spate of Holocaust memoirs that have come on out, and they're promoted, they're sold, they're put on school mandatory reading lists, and then they blow up in people's faces. Fragments is one of the better known. Frauds there. Now it's basically coming on out that the diary of Anne Frank is very suspect. Somebody actually found a sample of Anne Frank's real handwriting on the back of a surviving photo, and it absolutely does not match the writing in the diary. And you know that Anne Frank's father, Leo Frank, actually had a legal dispute with somebody that he'd hired to ghostwrite much of the book.
And part of that was written in ballpoint pen.
Which wasn't available in Europe until after the war was over.
I was a good friend with Dr. Robert Forasson from France. Matter of fact, last time I met when it was in Vichy, and he did a lot of work with that. He sat down and talked to Anne Frank's father.
Yeah.
And he tried to get a fingerprint. His father wouldn't give it to him. But that's also very interesting. But the point is here, what are we doing? We're looking for what really happened, if you don't mind me using the title. We're looking for the truth. And there's nothing anti-Semitic about looking for the truth. But it's become, I'm sorry to say, I think it's become a religion for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. They're raised to believe. They're told the story. You will believe. and that's it. Their minds are locked to this thing. I mean, children are taught things that they believe. Their personality evolves around those core beliefs, and it makes it very difficult to break away from those beliefs.
Yeah, I was actually at Auschwitz for the 50th anniversary of the Soder Commando uprising.
Yeah.
And that was quite interesting. I didn't expect what I saw. We had people up there testifying, and we had people dressed up in Auschwitz uniforms, and people were fainting all over the place. It was a scripted Hollywood scene. There was just no two ways about it.
Yeah. Anyway, what else would you like to talk about?
Well, I wanted to go into what are the ramifications for this, because it's being held over our heads as decent people that we owe all this.
Well, I take issue with that, okay? Because first of all, America had nothing to do with these slave labor camps.
Correct.
Or putting the Jews in there. In fact, America had a great deal to do with stopping Hitler from doing what he was doing. And common sense would tell you Israel should be grateful to us. Israel should be sending us money, not the other way around.
Exactly.
And because, World War II, a lot of people died there. A lot of families lost their primary breadwinners, and they suffered because of it. And you would think that Israel would show some gratitude to the United States and the other allies for bringing whatever it was going on in Germany to an end. But instead the attitude is, you didn't do enough for us, you didn't do it soon enough, you owe us money. My attitude is, I refuse to accept responsibility for anything that happened before I was born, because it's utterly ridiculous. Anyway, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And again, once more, we are holding our hand out to you for your support in keeping Republic Broadcasting alive and on the air. We don't have big corporate sponsors. We don't have the globalists shoveling money at us. George Soros didn't send us a Christmas card this year, and we really need your help. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can call in a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. The network thanks you. And of course, as always, over at whatreallyhappened.com, you can hit that donate button. And this month, folks, we could really use a little extra help. Anyway, we're getting on back here to James from Arizona, and to just sort of wrap up this Holocaust thing and get on to other subjects, you had one more thing you wanted to share with us.
I was just going to tell you, we did a little experiment at the Simon Wiesenthal Center for Museum of Tolerance, and they had a Holocaust survivor there that was lying through so much you couldn't believe it. But what was saddening to me is when the gentleman was done speaking, these children, 10, 11, 12 years old, went up to him, and he'd put his arm around him and have their picture taken with a Holocaust survivor, like it was God or something. Very depressing to see that happen. And the money that they bring in from this thing is incredible.
Yes.
I mentioned to you that we give Israel over $3 billion a year. That's on budget. And then they buy some armament from us and some other things. But part of that money goes back into paying off the Congress to give them more money.
It's a kickback scheme.
Yeah, and Israel does not need our money.
No, they just like it.
But I wanted to mention also that along with the USS Liberty, they have what's called the FIDF. That's the Friends of the Israeli Defense Forces. And I'm going back a few years now off the top of my head, but every time they have a fundraiser, there's people that donate millions of dollars.
Yes.
And assuming they're in the 80% bracket, which I'm sure they are, they donate $100,000, 80% is loss of tax revenue. Now, Larry Elliston donated $12 million at one of them, And they just don't run out of money. And the IDF are the same people that attacked the USS Liberty in 1967.
Yes.
And I'm very well familiar with that. I was acquainted with Admiral Thomas Moore, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time. And he had a funny story he always told. He said that Israel asked them for a certain weaponry, and he says, I don't have it. And they called him back the next day, and they told him, you have it, and here's where it is.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like... anyway, let me get this a little closer to you. There we are.
Okay.
All right. Certainly with the idea of the Liberty, I mean, to me, it was clear that the plan was to sink the Liberty, blame Egypt for it, to trick the United States into the war on Israel's side. And fortunately, the crew of the Liberty were able to improvise a radio antenna, because Israel had shot off the antennas on the first pass, and they got a message out saying we're being attacked by Israeli gunboats. And that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that Israel made, because the airplanes they used for the first part of the attack had no markings on them whatsoever. No. But they failed to sink the Liberty, and that's when they sent out these little patrol boats, torpedo boats, and they hadn't had time to remove the insignia. Yeah. So there was a little Star of David painted on the side of the hull. And that's
I think the planes were French Mirages, weren't they?
Yeah, but they had no military marks. I mean, the French Mirage was exported. Everybody had them. So that was not really compelling. But yeah, it was another false flag intended to get the United States into a war. And as I was saying earlier in the show, that's how these things get done. Yeah, and especially with America demonstrably becoming very tired of all the wars we've been in, I think false flags are going to get a lot worse and more bloody and more dramatic to try and rile up the war fever again. But I don't know about you. I'm burned out on all this conflict.
I am too. Admiral Moore, and my memory doesn't serve me well right now, and three other people were on a Blue Ribbon Committee. It was held in the Sam Rayburn building, and they came up with the conclusion that the attack was definitely deliberate, and not one single word about their findings was in the news.
No, the official story was it was a case of mistaken identity, that Israel's forces had mistaken the Liberty for an Egyptian horse carrier, because as we all know, horse carriers have large dish antennas all over the top of them.
Yeah. So that's another black mark on Israel, as far as I'm concerned.
You know, over at the U.S. Cryptographic Museum, they actually have the Liberty's flag on display with the holes in it from the Israeli cannon. The National Cryptographic Museum. Oh. Anyway, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And James, we were talking about, well, I think we'd pretty much finished up with the USS Liberty. I mean, the people who want to believe that Israel couldn't do something like that, we're never going to change their mind. Again, it's more of a religion. People want to believe what they want to believe. And part of the problem is our education system discourages critical thought.
Absolutely.
And it was especially bad under Common Core, which not only failed to educate our kids how to think, left them with such poor skills they can't compete even in the U.S. job market. That's why we're being flooded with these H-1B visa workers. And even Bill Gates, who put $400 million of his own fortune into Common Core, has now said the whole thing was a complete failure, and we need to go back to more traditional teaching methods.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to show them, just take 5 seconds, this hat that Mike sent me. I was doing some stuff.
Do you want them to see your last name?
I don't care, sure.
Oh, okay.
I was doing some work at the Tea Party conferences and sending the stuff to Mike, and I says, I got to have some way of identifying myself. Well, here's what he sent me. Now my mic is on, so you can't see it. But it's extra large. It doesn't fit.
Yeah.
But, you know, coming into the last portion of the program, I used to have a business, and I would have an employee come in, tell me about a problem. And I'd say, you're welcome to come in here and tell me you have a problem anytime you want to, but tell me what the answer is. So that's what brings me to, what is the answer to all this? Obviously, writing your congressman is a waste of time. They don't listen to you. Once they get in, they're beholden to the corporate structure, the funds and whatnot, and they're
beholden to whoever wrote them the biggest check, and right now the biggest checks are coming.
I don't have an answer to it. I really don't. The only thing I can say is don't back down from any of these things. If people say the Liberty was an accident, stand right up, and you know for a fact it isn't. Say no, it wasn't.
Yes.
Don't be afraid. You're going to get wrapped for it, but I don't know. Maybe you have some suggestions on that.
Well, my philosophy is let the truth be told, though the heavens may fall. I'm paraphrasing loosely from the Bible. And we have to stand for truth. We're living in an age in which we're literally being told that our patriotic duty is to believe the lies, and that is complete and utter nonsense. And we, the American people, deserve the truth. We're owed the truth. And if we cannot get it from corporate media and the government, we have to go on out and find it for ourselves, and just be aware that every entity, corporate or government, that seeks to control us is going to be lying to us to get what they want.
Yeah. And I think this website does a pretty good job of getting the news out there and being accurate with it.
Well, we're doing our best here. We do make a mistake every once in a while. We get fed a lot of bogus stuff in attempts to trip us up. And just like anybody who's out surfing the web, you have to be very, very careful. I mean, there are websites that have been set up that are bogus news websites. And I don't know who's paying for all of this, but all they do is churn out completely, they look like they're serious news sites, but they'll put out stuff like Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died in the hopes that it will get picked up and posted on the other websites like this one to make us look silly and stupid and try and drive the audience back to corporate media, which is in serious trouble. They had 15,000 layoffs last year. I don't know what the overnights are for the Academy Awards, but they've been trending down over the last couple of years as well. The American people are turning away from the lights and wires in a box.
Yeah.
And I think that's a healthy thing.
Well, I think that there's two things a person can do. One, you have to have intellectual courage.
Yes.
And that's pretty tough to do sometimes. You have to stand up maybe in a group of 6 or 7 and speak up the truth. And I don't know how to tell people to do this because each situation is different. You can't speak up and lose your job. It's a real
you can't.
Real touchy situation. And as far as the websites are going, I have a friend, and I really like him a lot, but he comes back at me and he says, well, there's so much junk out on the website. I says, well, think for yourself. Some people just want everything handed to them on a silver platter, and God, is everything true? Well, is everything true on whatreallyhappened.com website? No, we make mistakes. It happens.
Yeah, it does. No, but if you want somebody to just hand you what's going on, you're going to be handed a platter full of lies. To lead you to do whatever it is the government wants you to do. That's what propaganda is all about. Everyone always talks about mind control. All mind control is knowledge control. By controlling what the brain knows, you control what the brain thinks, and leads you to say, oh, we have no choice but to go to war in Syria. We have no choice but to go to war in Venezuela. We've got no choice but to go to war against Russia and China. And people need to wake up from that and realize Americans are the most lied to people on the face of planet Earth, and it's been that way for a very long time.
Yeah, that's true. And again, you can't walk in somebody's moccasins, or what is it? If you haven't walked in his moccasins, don't criticize him. It's very hard to do sometimes to stand up for the truth, but I don't know what the alternative is. I really don't. Obviously, writing your congressman is not an answer, and quite frankly, I've been visited with him face to face. Matter of fact, it was the old the other Bush, the father Bush. They don't really care. They really don't care. I can't tell you how disappointed it was.
Yeah.
That they just don't care.
That seems to be the mindset. I mean, the curse of political power, it attracts the people who shouldn't have it, most of whom seem to be showing symptoms of sociopathy. And that is a complete obliviousness to how their actions are harming other people around them. They're there for the money. They're there for more donations. They're all there getting incredibly wealthy. And they're willing to sell out the most basic fundamental principles on which this country was founded to please the masters with the checkbooks.
I think one answer is, and I don't know how to get it done. If we could take, like you had a senator that you just elected, and 6 months after you elected him, you found that he or she was going against everything they said they would do, everything you believe in, to get them out of office right then and there, throw them out after 6 months.
Yep.
But I don't know how you could do that. I just don't.
Well, I don't advocate violence on this website, but there is a little anecdotal story. Going back to my grandfather, he's the one who won the Croix de Guerre in World War I, was drinking buddies with Richard Nixon. But he was a very straight talker about politics, old school New Hampshire Republican. And he used to say, the way that you have a proper republic is that you elect a politician. And if they don't do what they promise they're going to do, and only what they promise they do, you shoot them. Then you elect another politician. And if they don't do what they promise they do, and only what they promise they do, you shoot them. Then you elect a third politician, and the chances are that guy's going to keep his promises. And
I like that.
That's kind of the way my grandfather would view these kind of situations. I really do think this country is heading for a Soviet Union-style collapse. And the most wise and prudent thing the American people can be doing right now is to be prepared to get through it and to form a new nation on the other side along the model of the Russian republics. And just as Putin had to kick out the oligarchs, we're going to have to kick out the career politicians and just say, no, you screwed it up. We're not letting you back in. You don't get a second chance.
Your thinking is good. I don't know whether the collapse will be a Russian Revolution type of thing or what, but this is all coming together. The system cannot take many more insults to it. It's like the human body. You keep punching holes in it, it dies pretty soon.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think people are ready for this at all. They're still living in a
I'm
in a dream world.
Sadly, I agree that you're right. I think most Americans are in denial about just how fragile the nation has become, how fragile the economy is. We are heading into a new recession that may wake some people up. But again, looking at the poll numbers about how Americans no longer trust corporate media and government, they're obviously out there thinking about what's going on. And you know, they're not going to have the fine details the way dedicated independent media have, because we work at this, we study this, but they know something's gone wrong with this country.
Well, the other thing it's a little bit tangential to what we're talking about here is there doesn't seem to be any rules for the media. You can have hackers; there's no punishment for them at all.
Yeah,
they can go on with it. And why is that? It's because the government doesn't want a punishment, or the way they would be punishing them.
Yeah, it's strange. Again, getting on back to the hate crime hoaxes, the hoaxers very rarely face any legal consequences. I mean, more recently they get hit with filing a false police report, and Jussie Smollett looks like he's facing a felony count, so he could go away to jail for 3 years.
Or they go to training. They are sent to Holocaust training or something.
Well, I don't. This was that racial hate crime and everything. So you were talking something about Chuck Yeager during the commercial break.
Yeah, well, Chuck Yeager was an interesting chap.
Yes, he was.
One of the things he did, and no people don't realize it, as you can read it in his book, is he wrote how he was given the order, not him personally, but the whole squadron, to strafe the fields, kill every cow, horse, child, man, woman. And he said, I did it.
Yeah.
Now, you can.
Do you know what he said after that?
No.
He said, if we're going to be doing things like this, we'd better win this war.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up. But that brings up the point of you can't bury that under the fog of war either, which, you know, reminds me of Lieutenant Colley in My Lai.
Yeah.
And things happen in war. Well, they don't happen in war.
They're made to happen.
Yeah. And one of the things that has been suppressed really well is the atrocities that the Allied forces committed against the Germans, for example, during the Second World War.
Oh, well, there's the firebombing of Dresden.
Dresden, yeah.
There were the internment camps for the Germans following Germany's surrender. They just starved those Germans to death.
Yeah, I think they were called the Eisenhower camps.
Yeah, that's right. They had the Eisenhower camps. And I remember I had uncles who served in Europe in World War II. And of course, I was just a little kid back then. But I remember them clearly saying, you know, don't believe what the school is telling you about the war.
Mm-hmm.
And just that simple.
I had an acquaintance. I used to work for my father when I was real young, and one of his employees was in the Second World War, and he witnessed all kinds of atrocities, and I suspect that he committed a whole bunch of them. And he would get to drinking and just go nuts. Nobody could even control him, and it was about his memories of being in combat.
PTSD.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, we called it shell shock.
That's right, yeah, shell shock.
And fortunately, my family tended to avoid that, but they'd been in combat. My grandfather would never say what he won the Croix de Guerre for, and he never wore it. So we don't know what that story was. He did lose a lung to the German mustard gas. And I still have his old gas mask and helmet.
Was that World War I then?
World War I.
Yeah,
He was part of the Yankee Division. Funny story about that one. The Yankee Division was actually put together by former President Teddy Roosevelt, who wanted to actually lead it into battle himself. And Woodrow Wilson said, absolutely not. The idea of a former president being captured by the enemy was unacceptable. And Roosevelt never forgave him for that. So they put together this Yankee Division, which included a lot of the original Rough Riders, and they sent them over to Europe. And it was an all-volunteer unit because war had not yet officially been declared between the United States and Germany. So war is declared, the draft is enabled, and they send out a draft notice for my grandfather. And, of course, he doesn't respond to it. So they send out, these officers looking for him. He's got to report to the draft here. Of course, he's already over in Europe.
Yeah.
And my family being the kind of people they are, they say, oh, I think I saw him over there in Pennacook yesterday. Yeah, I think so over there. Yeah, just go on over there. You can't miss him. And they ran these guys all around, and of course, after the war was over and Grandpa came on back and he had all these medals and decorations and everything, and they sort of realized that it had been nonsense to call him a draft dodger. But that was that little story. Interesting family history.
I was going to mention Palestine, or do you want to go on to something different?
Well, comment about Chuck Yeager before we go on to Palestine. I actually got to meet him. It was at Edwards Air Force Base, and they were celebrating, I think it was the 50th anniversary of breaking the sound barrier. And so he got into a jet plane, and he flew the original course that he'd flown in the X-1 over the Edwards salt flat. And, of course, we all got rattled by the sonic boom.
Yeah.
And that was really kind of cool. And somewhere around here buried, I still have my membership card in Pancho Barnes' Happy Bottom Riding Club.
That burned down, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it burned down and then it got bulldozed when they extended the runway.
Oh, I didn't know
that. Yeah, that's so you can't even do an archaeological dig on it anymore. But if you've seen the movie The Right Stuff, or if you've read Yeager's book, you'll know about it. Now, of course, obviously, Pancho Barnes and the Happy Bottom Riding Club were long gone before I was even born, but they still sell membership cards in it as a charity fundraiser thing.
Yeah.
And so I have one somewhere around here.
I spent 2 days with Pete Knight. He flew the last mission of the X-15.
Oh, yeah.
He was a good beer drinker.
Yeah.
Anyway, he told us...
Could you get into that thing sober?
He told us that when they fly something like that, a mission like that, as a pilot, they don't have a lot of options. That everything is programmed to do this, and this.
Oh, yeah, because they're recording the data, and the plane has to do exactly what the engineers need it to do to get meaningful data.
But
Yeager was great at that.
He said that if he'd have known it was the last flight, he'd have tried to get a little more out of it. And he said if I'd have tried to get a little more out of it, I'd have lost the plane because I had already lost too many tiles. Just an interesting side story.
Yeah, well, the X-15 was an amazing ship, and I know they broke one in two on landing. I know that Neil Armstrong in his early career was a pilot on the X-15 program.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So...
well, they only lost one of the X planes, I think.
Oh, we got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. That has to be one of the fastest third hours that we've ever done here. And we've got emails coming on in who are just amazed at what you know. And they're asking for you to come on back, which we can do with as a phone interview, because you're in Arizona and I'm here on Oahu, and you don't actually physically get out here all that often. Anyway, during the commercial break, Jim and I were sharing our knowledge, and I think between the two of us, we actually make one decent aeronautical historian.
Yeah.
And we were talking about Yeager's really bad accident in an F-104, and it was at that time when the test pilots at Edwards were making the decision whether to stay there or to go to the Cape, and Yeager stayed at Edwards, but they actually put him in charge of a program to train the astronauts. And part of that program was they took an F-104 Starfighter, which was blazingly fast. It was an interceptor. They put a booster rocket underneath the tail section and fitted it out with hydrogen peroxide jets and a little attitude controller like everybody's become used to. And the whole point of it was to boost this aircraft literally out of the atmosphere to where the regular control surfaces wouldn't work, and let the astronauts practice orienting it using the peroxide jets, as you would an attitude control jet. And coming back on into the atmosphere, Yeager ran afoul of the one major design flaw of the F-104, and that was that T-tail, that high tail, because that could get caught in the wind shadow from the main wings, and you couldn't pitch it back down. And apparently he emptied those peroxide jets trying to do that. Went into a flat spin, had to eject, and when the parachute opened, the spent ejector rocket hit him in the head, and that was where he got the really bad burns. And he was nursed back to health at the home of Jackie Cochran, who was the first woman to break the sound barrier. And Yeager had been her mentor. And Jackie had this habit of dousing airplanes that she'd fly at Edwards in her perfume because she thought they smelled so bad. And apparently she had very expensive perfume because it lingered for years. And pilots would like open up a plane. Oh, Jackie's been here. So anyway.
Well, tell him how old Chuck Yeager is now.
He's 96. He's still with us. I did a check online, and I'm glad he's doing so well, especially after the way his wife passed away, because the Air Force doctors, she'd had an illness, and they just kept X-raying her and X-raying her and X-raying her, and they didn't really understand at that time what too many X-rays can do. And I think in the end, it was the X-rays that killed her. But, Yeager's had a really good life. I don't think he's got any complaints.
No, he has. He's done a lot for the country, too.
He absolutely has. I think he retired as a brigadier.
I don't even know. I don't think he cared about rank.
Well, he certainly cared about the boost in pay and benefits.
Yeah.
All right, so we've been wandering down memory lane here, and maybe lightened up the show a little bit. Anyway, there's the music. Time for us to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day here. I got to do the Jim Goddard show up in Vancouver now. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with other people. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please, please, please donate to whatreallyhappened.com, or I'm going to have to sell Jim here for medical experiments. Okay. So we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.